We can get a little more complicated with this idea in something like a carousel where the user has to click on a button to scroll through the images. So over here, I've set up just a simple 3-image carousel with 3 different images. And the idea is I'm going to add in some icons for arrows here. And the thought is, let me add this into the frame. This will sit in the middle of the screen, but when the user clicks on a button, it will change from one image to the next. So to get this to work like that, this has to be a component. And we have to use the same properties of frame clipping and content overflow in order to switch from one state of the carousel to the next. First thing I need to do is to add this to a frame, just like with our horizontal scroll. So I'll name this carousel container. And then I'm going to check clip content on this. So what that lets me do is it lets me change the width of the bounding box without removing the content inside. So I'm also going to remove this padding here. Oops. Okay, so now you can see that our carousel items extend beyond this container, but the container itself is only as wide as the items in it. So when I click on a button, I want this to move where the carousel is within this frame. To do that, we have to give ourselves some buttons. I'm going to go ahead and use a plugin for that just to grab some icons. I'm going to run material symbols. I'm going to look for some arrows. Let's go with this one. So let's make this filled in. I'm going to go ahead and click on this to add it to my page. And then I'm going to scale this up just a little bit. Okay, so I have to make sure this is in my container. Go ahead and center this. Just put it right on the edge there. I'm going to hold Alt or Option to duplicate this. And then I'm just going to flip it around for the other side. And now all of this I can turn into a component. So now that I have this as a component, I can add variants to it. I'm going to go ahead and make 3 different versions of this for the 3 different images. And let's call this property position. We'll make this position 1, this position 2, this position 3. Then I have to edit the location of that carousel within each one. I need to make sure that this doesn't move this out of the frame. So sometimes an easier way than clicking and dragging on this, you can see once I move my cursor outside of the component container, it doesn't like that. It thinks I'm trying to move it out of the component altogether. Sometimes I'll just adjust the X position over here in my properties panel. That seems to make it a little easier to keep things where I want them to be. So that'll be our position 2. And then in our position 3, you can see, oops, I have to make sure that I'm selecting the carousel. And for the second one, you can see that I moved this over 417 pixels. I could keep this really clean by making sure that this is 417 pixels times 2. Now I can go ahead and link these up. This will be a little bit more of a complex prototype because I don't want to link this whole frame to the next thing. What I actually want to link is just this icon, this tap target. So when I press right, I want it to go to this one, position 2. From position 2, when I press right, I want it to go to position 3. But I also want the left arrow to go back to position 1. And from position 3, I want the left arrow to go back to position 2. And we could make this continuous by making position 3's right arrow go back to position 1, and position 1's left arrow to go back to position 3, so it's continuous. So you'll see this is a little more complicated than the ones we've done in the past. Now if I add in a frame, I'm going to add in an instance of this to preview it, and you can see that this is a little bit too large. So I'm going to use my scale tool and scale this down just slightly. Go ahead and preview this. And now when I click right, it continues to scroll through. When I click left, it's able to go back. Now, because it's looking for the X and Y position of those endpoints, this isn't perfect in that when I push right, this image doesn't go left to get to the next one. It jumps all the way back, but for prototyping, that's okay. Overall, though, this is pretty clean. This looks pretty nice. And that is an example of how you can use a combination of clipping content or animation features and then prototyping on individual elements to cycle through content.